because he was the enemy of the British. And so the enemy of my enemy is my friend. In Bombay, in 1970, I think it was 1976, I brought a large party of devotees from Germany overland to India with big touring buses, a Mercedes touring bus and an MAN touring bus. But these touring buses turned out to be a real problem, because in India you need what's called a carnet. It's like a visa for a person, but it's a visa for a vehicle. So I wound up really just always shuffling these vehicles around, trying to keep them in the country and not getting really much accomplished. In the course of doing this, I lost touch with Prabhupada. Prabhupada didn't like it when you didn't communicate with him on a regular basis. You were supposed to send a report at least once a month and in some way keep touch more often than that. And in India it was even more important because India is so difficult. So I had been out of touch maybe for 2 months and finally caught up with Prabhupada in Bombay. So when I came in and I was making my obeisances, Prabhupada said, "A rolling stone gathers no moss," which I thought is a compliment. He said, "Better sit down and gather some moss." Then I realized, oh, it's not a compliment. He said, "Where have you been?" So I explained to him. He said, "Anyway, why not go to Sri Lanka and preach?" I said, "Well, Prabhupada, you know, it's a small place, and you can go there for a week or two, but then, you know." He said, "Oh, everyone there is Krishna conscious?" I said, "No." He said, "Anyway, you can go to Pakistan, or you can go to Sri Lanka." I said, "I'll go to Sri Lanka." When I heard Pakistan, I said, "No, I can't do that." Prabhupada had this, when we were traveling the first year in India, 1970, 71, oftentimes we'd go to very, very remote places. One time we went to a place, they were pulling us in a camel cart. And you know, a camel is quite tall. And the cart was quite low, and it was hooked up pretty close to the camel. So you can imagine how that was. And we were being paraded through the town doing Harinam. Or sometimes we'd walk, but it would just be a dusty, you know, a dusty hamlet in the middle of nowhere. But no matter where it was, Prabhupada would inevitably say, "Yes, this is a very nice place," and he would find, you know, some qualification which made it somehow or other a good place. It was centrally located, or the people are all very enthusiastic, or the food here is very nice. And then he would say, so are you prepared to stay here and open the center?" And I was thinking, no. I said, "Yes, Prabhupada." Terrified that he'd leave you there to open the center. Of course, that never happened to me, but Prabhupada came to Sweden, Stockholm, Sweden, and that was my zone in those days. I don't remember the year, but he lectured at Uppsala University. So after the lecture, one student raised his hand. He said, "Well, Hermann Hesse says in his book, Siddhartha, so forth and so on." Prabhupada just let the guy wind out with his thing. When he was finished, Prabhupada said, "Who's Hermann Hesse?" And you know, Hermann Hesse in those days was really in. If you didn't know who Hermann Hesse was, you were nobody. The Prabhupada says, "Who's Hermann Hesse?" And the student replies, "You don't know who Hermann Hesse is? He's the author of this, that." Prabhupada said, "Hermann Hesse is not one of the acharyas, therefore he has no importance." And that was the end of it. Just swept it away. In London, Prabhupada, we'd already been told by Prabhupada how astrologers are all, you know, after money and women, and that astrology is a lost art. And he said his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada, was a great astrologer, but he gave it up. He said, "Don't bother with astrology. We are just depend on Krishna." Anyway, one day Pradyumna, who was Prabhupada's Sanskrit secretary and was very fond of all this kind of thing, he said, "I'm going to go see B.K. Gandhi, astrologer. Do you want to come?" I said, "Yeah, okay," you know, knowing Prabhupada didn't want me to go, I went. So when we got back, Prabhupada said, "Where have you been?" So I couldn't lie. I was with Pradyumna. Pradyumna, doing what? I said, well, he took me to see an astrologer. Astrology? I said, why? Well, Pradyumna, you know. He said, astrologers are nonsense. Why did you go? I have instructed you not to go. I said, well, Pradyumna asked me to go. He said, so if Pradyumna asks you to jump off the bridge, you'll jump? No, Prabhupada. So whenever we did something that wasn't sanctioned, it invariably came to light. One time, Prabhupada had taught us you can't lick the envelope. You have to use a little water and do like that. That's suchi. And this is muchi. We were in Chandigarh. I was sitting on the bed. I had finished all the correspondence, sealed it up, but suddenly I discovered one letter remained that hadn't been sealed. But I'd already put everything away. So I immediately, came to mind, Prabhupada doesn't want us to lick the envelope, but it's just too troublesome to get that water again and do that. So I thought, well, So just as I'm going like this, Prabhupada opens the door and walks in, and he points his finger. So that was Prabhupada. In Germany, Prabhupada came to Germany in I think it was 74. At any rate, during a morning walk with all the German devotees who had only seen him that one time in their Krishna conscious life, walking through the fields, we had this castle called Schloss Rettershof. Schloss means castle. Rettershof. It was a nice brownstone building. Prabhupada liked it very much, and it was situated on an old estate. Ritter means the knights that went to war from the 11th century, 1150 or something. It was very old, very beautifully landscaped, and sat on a kind of a hill that overlooked the valleys that just rolled into the distance, picture perfect. And every day Prabhupada would take a walk through these fields. It was just beautiful. Anyway, one day while we were in this walk, he heard a helicopter go overhead. So Prabhupada looked up at the helicopter, and the devotee commented, that's a helicopter. Prabhupada said, yes, I know. Shyam Sundar once, he took me by helicopter from Heathrow Airport. He said, so I know. He said, and then he began to laugh. He said, but of course, I had to pay. But that was his service. He said something to that effect. Anyway, then he began to tell a story to illustrate how, although Shyam Sundar took him by helicopter, and it was a very nice thing, very sensational way to, bypass all the London traffic, that inevitably Prabhupada had to pay for that. So he tells a story about the guru and his disciple. And the guru entrusts all his money and everything with the disciple, and this expert disciple makes all these nice programs and arrangements for him. So each place they go to, the arrangements are just first class. The food, the pond, everything is first class. And each time the guru is very pleased. He says, I'm very pleased with you. You have done an excellent. And the disciple says, it's all your mercy. It's just all your mercy. So this goes on one after the other. When they finally complete their tour, the guru wants to, he wants to access the money that he kept in trust with his disciple. And the disciple said, but I used it to arrange all those programs. He said, I told you it was all your mercy. And Prabhupada just burst into this, enormous belly laugh. There's some pictures of it, you see. And it was really delightful. The first time Prabhupada comes to Montreal, I had the opportunity to go in the car and drive back from the airport. And this was my first time to be in very close association with Prabhupada. So I thought, I'm going to hear some very profound philosophical things. So as we're driving, Prabhupada, it was kind of an older car, kind of a jalopy. It belonged to Janardhan, who was a student, so he didn't have much money. So Prabhupada noticed that the car was kind of beat up and old. And he asked what kind of car it was. Then he started to tell a story about a man who could tell any make of car just by hearing the sound. And so his friends decided to test him. So they blindfolded him, and one car after another, he said, oh, that's a Buick, that's a Chevy. So then the friends, they took a donkey and they tied tin cans and scraps to the tail of the donkey and whipped it and ran it by the man. And the man said, oh, that's a Ford. And Prabhupada just burst into, laughter. And I'm sitting in the back, I'm trying to figure out how this is spiritually profound. And I was so prejudiced towards hearing something of a philosophical nature that I was completely bewildered. Like, what does this have to do with Krishna consciousness? Oh, that's a Ford. And Prabhupada just laughed. In Montreal, in the same bowling alley, Prabhupada he was on the Vyasa stand. So after one lecture and questions, one person raised their hand and said, Prabhupada, would you sign